What's up guys, it's MTG Matt for you, and today we're going to be covering all the Kaldheim spoilers that I've missed covering over the weekend, so from January 14th on until all the cards yesterday. And those were a lot of cards, a lot of cool cards also, and I'm not going to be covering all of them because that would be way too much. Instead, I cut out all the fat, and I'm only going to present to you the cards which I think we should talk about, which can be relevant for the meta, and which are just cool cards. So let's just jump right into there, and we're going to start with one of those cycle lands. It's third land Frostspire. Red land, certain Frostspire and spell wheel tapped. You can add it for red mana, and you can pay 2, double blue and red. Tap it, sacrifice it, scry 2. And third land Frostspire deals 2 damage to each creature. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So I think this effect is actually really decent. I could see this being played in maybe Jeskai control, or Giant Tribal looks like a semi-control mid-range deck, which has big giants which don't care about 2 damage being dealt to them. So you could put this into a Giant Tribal deck and use it as a mini board wipe against small creatures from opponent. This helps, for example, really well against Dimir Rogues, against those C-skill enforcers. If Dimir Rogues is still going to be a thing in the meta, which actually I think it is, because it's still a very strong deck. But that's besides the point. And the other thing is, just in Jeskai control, maybe in a Yorion Jeskai control deck, you just put 1, maximum 2 of these into your deck to have a mini board by the Velvel, plus you scry 2, which is always nice, helps you filter through your deck. So I think it's a very decent utility card of which you probably would put 1 or 2 of into your deck. It's also really meta dependent. If there is a lot of aggro creature decks out there, then this is definitely a good fit. So I would put this in the tier 3 category. I think this is definitely going to see some play here and there. It's not super amazingly game breaking, but it's a cool effect that can help you against certain decks. Right, next up we got Port of Carfell, another one of these utility lands. It's the same with all of these. End of the battlefield tap, you add blue mana, and then you can pay 3 mana, a blue and 2 black, so a total of 6 mana. Plus you have to tap this, so it's actually 7 mana effectively. And you sacrifice Port of Carfell, mill 4 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And I have some notes here on the side. And now, first thing I want to note about this card is that this activate ability doesn't state that you have to do this at sorcery speed, right? You can do this at instant speed, which is a big deal, because sure, your creature comes into battlefield tap, but if you do it on your opponent's end step, you untap immediately and your creature basically gets haste in that way, right? And I've made some notes, and I feel like with Kaldheim we're getting a lot of support for reviving creature cards from the graveyard. This is not the only card from Kaldheim that brings back creature cards from the graveyard. So maybe there's some kind of archetype developing there, putting cards into a graveyard and then reanimating them instead of casting them for the higher casting cost. Is a thing, has always been in Magic. It's just not right now in the meta. But I think a card like this can really help, and I just let my mind wander and just see, what would be cool creatures to reanimate with this, giving them basically haste. So there's this giant wizard coming from Kaldheim. It's Third Land Elementalist, costs 7 mana. It's an 8/8, which says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, reveal a giant card from your hand or pay 2. So if you don't have giants, it's even more costly. It says, whenever Third Land Elementalist attacks, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand without paying its mana cost. So the attack trigger is very strong, but this card obviously suffers from the fact that it doesn't have haste, so it can just sit on the board, get board wiped, or just removed. Well, with Port of Carfell, you can revive this, give it basically haste, and then have big, powerful creature with a big, powerful effect. So that's, for example, one way to abuse this. Another really nice example is I fully expect Sultai Control to be a viable control deck because I think Sultai Control right now is actually also a decent archetype. It's not played very much, or it's not very popular, but the potential is there. And Sultai Control, I think, an idea I've been thinking about is that you could build like a Sultai Control Super Friends deck with Vorinclex, because Vorinclex doubles all loyalty counters of your Planeswalkers when they enter the battlefield. But the thing is, Vorinclex costs 6 mana, and it's got the same problem, right? It has like enchantment effect, but your opponent can just remove it because it's a creature. Well, with Port of Carfel, what you could do is, hold your mana open in Sultai Control. You're holding your mana open with counter spells. And if you don't use the mana, crack your Port of Carfel, revive a Vorinclex of your opponent's end step, and then you untap with a Vorinclex on your board, and you can, play your Planeswalkers, play your Garruk, Cursed Huntman, immediately Emblem, and so on. So, some cool stuff here. I think also some potential here. As I said, one or two of in a deck, perfectly fine. So let's speed this up. So I would give this probably even less use than the 3 mana thing, but I think it's quite powerful still. This might be actually like a tier 4 card because I think it's rarely played. It's also very costly, but like a one-off. I think the effect is cool, but I think like Reanimate won't be like a strong archetype, so I'm putting this into the tier 4 category, just to be cautious. Next we got X-Guard Armory. It enters the battlefield tapped, adds white, and for a total of 4 mana, so 1 generic, 2 red and white, you sacrifice it, and you search your library for an aura card or an equipment card, reveal them, put them into your hand, and shove your library. So, really great card right here. You get 2 very specific cards from the deck that can be both aura. Is it actually? Could they be both aura cards? I don't think so. It must be an aura card and an equipment card, or just an aura card, or just an equipment card. But still, yeah, seems very good. Boros is getting pushed in his equipment area, and Boros Warriors is not a really good deck, actually, but I think you could, build like a Boros equipment center deck without going too much in this warrior direction. And maybe you instead replace some warriors with some, I don't know, more efficient creatures. That being said, this would go in the warrior archetype, right? And yeah, this is just really decent. Like, you don't sacrifice too much tempo. I think it's the same with all these utility lands. You want to have like 1 or 2 max in your deck, because you probably won't be able to activate this effect that often in games. But this one is really decent. It's effectively 5 mana, draw 2 specific cards, but this can get you your Embercleave, your Morals the Skyclays. Aura cards are not that present right now in the meta, but maybe this opens up some options. I doubt it, but still, right? There's this additional flexibility, but just the baseline, get you Embercleave, Morals the Skyclays. So really, really cool, and I fully expect this to be used in like tier 3 decks, maybe tier 3 warrior decks. Berserker Tribal could become a thing, right? So just a really decent utility land right here. Next up, we got Ascendant Spirit. Yeah, this one has a lot of people talking. It's 1 mana, 1/1 Snow Creature Spirit. It's got 3 activated abilities, all of which you activate with mana from Snow Source. Okay, so first activated ability, 2 mana, Ascendant Spirit becomes a Spirit Warrior with base power and toughness 2/3. 3 mana. If Ascendant Spirit is a warrior, put a flying counter on it and it becomes a Spirit Warrior Angel with base power and toughness 4/4. And then 4 mana, if Ascendant Spirit is an angel, put 2 1/1 counters on it, and it gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to player, draw a card. So a lot of stuff going on here. This is kind of a level up effect. First thing I want to note is these are just regular activated abilities, which means you can activate them at instant speed. And that's a big deal, because this means you can play this on turn 1. Its turn comes back to you, it's turn 2, you just hold your mana open, and say your opponent wants to stomp this with his Bone Crusher Giant, you can just activate the ability, make it have 3 toughness, and this way survive. And if you don't use the activate ability, maybe you use a counter spell, or to me, this card alone could make like a mono blue tempo archetype viable again, maybe. And this archetype you would have like your, what's it called, like this octopus you mutate on creatures, and then when they do combat damage to a player, you draw a card. Yeah, that octopus costs 2 mana to mutate at flash speed. This is a nice target also to just to mutate on, right? And so that's really cool. And then, the 3 mana, it becomes a 4/4 with flying, which is really cool. And then 4 mana, it becomes 6/6 and draws you a card when there's common damage to players. So for me, this is a mono blue tempo card. Mono blue tempo is non-existent right now in the meta. Maybe through this becomes better in combination with Snow. And one thing I noted about mono blue tempo, about this card, there's this other card that's got revealed called Avalanche Caller. It was in some of the previews before, which is a 2 mana 1/3 Snow creature human wizard. It was a card which says pay 2 mana, target snowline you control becomes a 4/4 elemental creature with hexproof and haste until end of turn. It's still a land. And all that mono blue wants is like small, efficient creatures which can just, over the game grow by themselves or have more utility by themselves, while just counter your opponent's plays or bounce your opponent's creatures or anything. And Ascendant Spirit definitely gives you that. It's always a nice mana sink. It can grow over time and really become a threat that even draws you cards. And maybe together with like the Avalanche Caller, it's a way of building like a mono blue tempo deck. I think there's some potential there. That being said, of course, this card has a lot of downside also. It's, you dump a lot of mana into it and then it just dies the removal spell. Even in a mono blue tempo deck, you always have these turns where you where you just can't hold up mana for counter spells, and then, one eliminate, and this is just gone, and maybe you jumped like 6 mana into it or even more. So just a cool card. I think this could enable like a mono blue archetype. Maybe there's some potential together with some snowy stuff. So Ascendant Spirit for me is a tier 3 card. I think this is definitely playable in some decks. But really depends on the archetypes playing, because I think this goes in the mono blue tempo deck. Could I imagine this being played in other deck archetypes? Nothing that comes to my mind right now. Really nothing. Decks that play blue right now in the meta is like Dimir Rogues, maybe some milling decks, Azorius Control, but you wouldn't put this in Azorius Control. So it needs to be like a tempo deck. This is tough, but my gut feeling is telling me this is like tier 3, I think. So let's leave it there. It might be tier 4 actually, if I want to be realistic, tier 4, but I want this to be tier 3. Maybe I'm influenced from other people's opinions right now. But I leave it at tier 3. I don't know. It's tough, man. Tier 3, tier 4. Tier 3. I made a decision. Alright, next up. Poison Cup. 3 mana instant, you pay exactly murder cost. So 1 generic, 2 black. Destroy target creature if the spell was foretold, scry 2. And you can foretell for 1 and a black. Now, we have Murder. Murder is a standard black removal card. You pay exactly the same, and it also just destroys a creature without the upside of foretell, right? So this is a strictly better Murder, and I actually really like this card. I think, right now we have a lot of removal spells at 2 mana, or 2 mana or below. We have Eliminate is really good. We got Blood something. the 1-mana removal spell. And then we got, is it called Merciless Execution? I always forget this card. That, 2 mana removes a creature with no counters on it. This costs 3 mana, but you can foretell it, and you obviously would play this only in a control deck. So I think, Esper control is always a strong archetype, and I would imagine this being in like Esper control. You have nothing to do, foretell this, cast it on later on for 2 mana, destroy any creature with 0 requirements, any creature, and then scry 2, which is really cool. So I really like this card. For me, this is like a definite tier 3 card. Where is it? I'm going to experiment with this card because I think it's very decent. Just upgraded murder is fine. Where is it? Did I forget to download this? It seems like it. Okay, I think I missed out on this card, putting it in here. Oh no, it's here. There it is. There we go. Alright. Next we got Usher of the Fallen. 1 white for 2/1 Spirit Warrior with Boast. Pay 1 white to create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. Activate its ability only if this creature attacked this turn and only once a turn. Yes, this is a perfectly great, awesome, decent card. This is perfect for the warrior tribal archetype because warrior was still missing like another good 1-drop. Right now they basically have only this 1 mana red goblin. Which gets haste when you equip it, and when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. Which is a good 1-drop, but I think, Boros Warriors needs another archetype. This is another one in white even. It's aggressively statted with 2/1, which is great. And if you have a really bad starting hand, you can attack with this on turn 2 and have something where you put your mana into. And even down the road, it creates human warrior creature tokens, so it also benefits from Anthem effect. Just a really cool, decent card, which fills out perfectly the warrior tribal deck. So this is a tier 3 card. Where it is? There we go. Next I've got In Search of Greatness. Now this has a lot of people talking. Let's go through it. It's 2 green mana for an enchantment, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a permanent spell from your hand with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the highest converted mana cost among other permanents you control without paying its mana cost. If you don't, scry 1. Now, my first reaction to this card, as for I think a lot of people, was like, whoa, this is totally overpowered, what's going on? But hear me out, this card is definitely not overpowered, because here's the thing. First thing I did wrong when reading this card first was a small but important detail. It says, cast this card without paying its mana cost equal to 1 plus the highest converted mana cost among other permanents you control. So first, it's equal, which means let's say you have a Lost-Rock Beast on the battlefield and In Search of Greatness, and it's your upkeep. There's triggers. Lost-Rock Beast has 3 CMC. You add 1 to it, so you add 4 CMC. So you cast something from your hand with exactly 4 CMC without paying its mana cost. And the mistake that I made when first reading this card was that I assumed it's it's like this 4 CMC or below, which it's not. It needs to be exactly 4. So there's already a big restriction right there. And the second big restriction is that it says highest converted mana cost among other permanents you control. So this doesn't count itself, which means if you were to play nothing on turn 1, play this on turn 2, and then it's your upkeep, right? You have 0 other permanents. So this by itself as 1, you would be allowed to cast something for CMC 1 without paying its mana cost. So you notice there are a lot of restrictions right there. And plus this restriction makes it so you really need to think about ahead when deck building. Can I actually use this card? Because what if my deck is just not built in a way to support this, how would you say, this calculation of the CMC, which lets me cast something for free? And yeah, I've tried to go through this and just you know, just came up with a nice angle. So I took Gruul Aggro or Gruul Midrange, which we have right now in the meta, where you could put this in, right? And let's say on turn 1 you play your Fervent Champion. Turn 2 you play your In Search of Greatness. And then your turn 3 comes around, so what can you cast? You have your Fervent Champion on the board, hopefully. So that's 1 CMC, plus the 1 CMC for In Search of Greatness. So on turn 3 you are allowed to play something from hand with exactly CMC 2 without paying its mana cost. Now Gruul Aggro has Brushfire Elemental at CMC 2. So on turn 3 you would play a Brushfire Elemental for free. And it's turn 3, so you could play a Kazunu Mammoth with your actual mana, right? And then, which is nice, but you completely skip your turn 2. And then, let's say your Loststruck Beast or your Kazunu Mammoth, they survive, right? And turn 4 comes around. Well, the dream is that on turn 4 you have your 3 CMC from your Loststruck Beast, plus the 1 from In Search of Greatness, which makes 4 CMC. And you play a Questing Beast for free, or even better, a Great Henge, because Great Henge is reduced to 4 mana by Loststruck Beast. That would be the magical Christmas land. But the question is, you see when I talk you through this example is, everything needs to be perfect in my mind to really make this card worthwhile. And you know, if your opponent removes creatures and then your upkeep comes around, you don't have anything to play from your hand for free, this just scries you 1 and you skipped your turn 2. So I think there's so many challenges with this card. I don't... yeah, I mean, I don't actually think this goes in creature decks. I think you really need to sit down, think about where could this fit in. Like, what comes to mind is like Shrine decks, because Shrines have a lot of permanents on the battlefield. Maybe that could help out, but Shrines are already cheating permanents into play, so that's not really necessary. But yeah, you need some kind of deck which wants to put a lot of permanents on the battlefield, so enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers, and then you need to make sure that, you know, the possible combinations that you have with 1 plus the highest CMC from your other permanents actually fits to the rest of the cards in the deck. So what I really like about this card, while I'm speaking, you know, is it challenges you as a player to really think about how you build your deck. So I think that's great. What do I think about the viability of this card? It's really hard to evaluate. I don't think it's broken. I don't think so. The Scry one is always nice, but this is a tough one. I might give this like a 2. Like a tier 3 maybe? Tier 3, tier 4? This is a tough one. I mean, cheating mana... Okay, here's my train of thought. Historically, cheating mana cost has always been really, really good, so I put this in tier 3. I give this the benefit of the doubt. Alright, next up we got Scamfar Avenger. 1 in the blue for an Elf Berserker, it's a 3-1, and whenever another non-token Elf or Berserker you control dies, draw a card and you lose 1 life. Well, there's not so much to say about this card. First of what's the big downside is it says another Elf or Berserker, so if this dies, you don't get to draw a card. So that's the difference to Midnight Reaper from, you know, previous standard sets, which also drew you a card and you lost 1 life when it died itself. This doesn't do that, so that's a big downside. But apart from that, you know, you build an Elf tribal deck, you build a Berserker tribal deck, you're gonna put this card in there. It's really nice for the 2 slot, it's aggressively statted. Not much to say, so this is like a tier 3 card. If you build your Elf or Berserker deck, this is going to go in there. Next up, we got another one of those utility lands. Is Scamfar Elder Hall. You know, enter tapped as green. And an activate ability, 2 generic, 2 black, and a green. Sacrifice it. Up to 1 target creature you don't control gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Create 2 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast sorcery. So, big downside here, only sorcery speed. That's actually really big downside because Ideally, you want to use this in a way that you can remove a creature from your opponent, right? And then, on your opponent's turn, and then when your turn comes around, those 1/1 elf warrior creature chunks are already ready to attack. So that's unfortunately not possible. That's the downside. What you can do though is, for example, go to combat. Your opponent blocks, his creatures take damage, and then you finish off one of his creatures with the -2/-2. And I think that can be possible because I'm sure that people would occasionally forget that this card is on the battlefield. But that being said, this is only sorcerer speed, so you basically spend your whole mana to give a creature -2/-2, and to create 2 elf warrior creature tokens. It's like, okay, whatever. So I think this is actually not that great. Maybe like a one-off in an elf deck, but really that's it, not more. I think this is one of the worst utility lands, so I could see this getting like Fringe Blade in an elf tribal deck as a one-off, so I put this into like a tier 4 category. Next we got Nodwald Slumber Mount. It ends the battlefield tab at red, blah blah blah. And then you pay a total of 6 mana, 3 generic, a red and 2 green. Sacrifice it, so effectively 7 mana. Destroy target land, create a 4/4 green troll warrior creature with trample. Now I think this card is actually really good. Now the mana cost is very, very high, but I think this card is good for 2 reasons. First of all, we have a functioning Gruul deck right now in the meta, which is powerful, right? It's really up there in the meta. And it already works well, which means like putting another land in there, whose only downside is that it comes into play tapped, doesn't hurt the deck so much. And in return, you get a potential finisher later in the game. Because you can activate this at instant speed, get a 4/4 with trample even, and you activate this on your opponent's end step, get a 4/4, and then hopefully finish him out. So that's really cool. Plus, another thing about this card is destroy target land. Now, this is obviously good, but I think the reason why this is especially good is because we are going to have the World Tree in Standard, which, in my opinion, from what I've seen from all of the Kaldheim spoilers, is the only mistake I've seen so far in the whole set concerning balanced card. I think the World Tree, even if it's balanced, I don't think it's going to be healthy for the meta. It's just too convenient of mana fixing. And it's a land, so it's really hard to interact with. Now this can get rid of that. So, if the meta becomes like World Tree heavy, here you have something, another way to destroy that land. So I think that's just a nice added upside. Plus, it's always nice you can destroy Castle Ardenvales, or even Crawling Barrens. That's the big one, right? So I think it's a really good utility land, and it in itself is not deck defying, but I would definitely see this in Gruul midrange. So, and Gruul midrange is a good deck, right? So I could see this being frequently played in those decks. So I put this into the tier 2 category, actually. Next up, oh yes, we get Tundra Fumarole. 3 mana snow sorcery in red. Tundra Fumarole deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Add colorless for each snow mana spent to cast spell. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Now, I think I made some notes about this. Yeah, so yeah, that's a really great card, just right away. You play Snowlands. This is basically pay 0 mana, deal 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker, so very versatile. 4 damage is also it's a good chunk of damage, right? It gets rid of a lot of creatures. That being said, we have, Lost Strike Beast, which it does not get rid of, but still, it's very good removal. Plus, it hits planeswalkers, so that's amazing. Let's talk a bit about the downside of this card. You get colorless mana. So what if turn 3 comes around and you want to use this to remove an opponent's creature, and you tap out and then you have only colorless mana. What do you do with it? Well, obviously you need artifacts. So you can put this into like I would put this in like a green, in like a big red control deck, right? For example, and in those decks you definitely run Maze Mind Tomes, because something like big red control has the problem of card draw. Maze Mind Tome fixes that problem, and it's an artifact. So a play pattern could be turn 2, play your Maze Mind Tome, turn 3, remove something with the Tundra Fumarole, gain 3 generic mana, use 2 of those manas for drawing a card with Maze Mind Tome. That seems like a cool play pattern. Apart from that, because of this, let's say, challenge, this card actually works best when you don't play it on turn 3. So if you have colorless mana left after casting this, then this is just a 0 mana, deal 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Amazing. Like, really, really good. So, I think this is a tier 2 card. It's like a really good premium removal spell. And where is it? There it is. I think this is a tier 2 card. I really like this. Oh, next up, we got one of my favorites. This is so cool. Spoiler alert, this is so cool. I love it. It's Cosima, God of the Void. So another one of the blue gods. It's 3 mana 2/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile Cosima. If you do, it gains whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. If Cosima is exiled, you may put a Voyage counter on it. If you don't, return Cosima to the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters on it and draw X cards, where X is the number of Voyage counters on it. Okay, and then the other side is the vehicle. It's the Omen Keel 2 mana legendary artifact. It's a 3/3 with crew 1, which says whenever a vehicle you control deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles that many cards from the top of the library. You may play lands from among those cards for as long as they remain exiled. So, a lot of stuff going on here. First off, let's talk about Cosima. So what I like about Cosima right away is, besides the whole text, is 4 toughness. And 4 toughness is great because it survives Bone Crusher Giant Storms. It survives one of those 2 mana, deal 3 damage to a target creature types of removal spells in red. So that's really big. So it has the toughness is there to, make it so this doesn't die to everything, that's already really, really cool. Which means that if you play this on turn 3, sure, your opponent can immediately remove it with a removal spell. That can happen. But at least it has some survival chance against direct damage or even combat damage, right? So that's already good. And yeah, I mean, you just play this in like a I think Azorius Control would love this, because here's a play pattern you can have. Turn 1, turn 2, you do your usual control stuff. I don't know, you play your Omen of the Sea, or you play your Saga that gives you an Plains, blah blah blah. Turn 3, you play this. You might, let's say you face up against Gruul. You could block like a 1/1, so your opponent won't attack with that. So you already, just with this creature out, you could block something, which means you take less damage. And then turn 4 comes around, you exile this, and you board wipe with Shadow the Sky. And on turn 4, you already play the land. This already gets the counter, and then really, anytime you play a land, you can say, you know what? Right now, 3, 4, 5 turns later, I would like to get this free creature into play with 4/1 counters it, and I draw 4 cards. That's like so good. Like, you get a big creature on board for free. So in a way, this is like foretell, because you could view it as you foretell it for 3 mana, then it's a creature on the board, and then turn after it goes into exile and it comes back later, but it comes back later for free. And it draws a card, it's big. This is just so cool. You can invest the mana up front, and in a control deck, you control it, your opponent is low on resources, you get this big creature on the board which can potentially even deal a lot of damage. I love this card. I think the design is super cool. It doesn't cost you to grow it, you just play your land every turn, which you're gonna do it anyway. And then you can draw a lot of cards later, plus get a big creature on board. So really cool. The only challenge for this card is, first off, removal spells, and secondly, yeah, you really invest 3 mana up front to do nothing, because this is 1 turn on the board, hopefully it survives, but then gets exiled so you don't have the creature anymore. But as I said, if you board wipe, this could even be an upside, so really cool. And then the other side is actually also pretty good, because you can put multiple of these in the deck, right? And then if you draw another Cosima, you can play the artifact side, and great thing is it's got crew 1. And if you play this in Azorius control, you will have your castle Ardenvase lying around, which make you 1/1. So you can actually like reliably crew this later in the game. And then if you hit your opponent for free, you exile top 3 cards of the library and you may play those cards. Now, it doesn't say that you may use your mana as though it were mana of any kind. It doesn't say that. But remember, we're going to have the world tree in the meta, which means as long as you have 6 or more lands, all your lands produce any mana. So that's not even a problem. So really good card. And one thing I want to know, which I just realized, is that, if you have your Cosima, your 1 Cosima in exile, you can play another one on the battlefield, because obviously the ledger rule doesn't apply, and you can also exile this. And you can have multiple of these in exile, which all grow. But then if you decide to get them on the battlefield, they all come back at once, because it says, if you don't return Cosima, it doesn't say you may return. So, but this could still be good, right? Because then you get multiple ETBs and draw multiple cards. So really cool card. How do I evaluate this? Is this like a tier 2 card? Is this like a tier 3 card? This is tough. This is definitely tough. I think do I put this at like tier 2? I think it's actually really good, but it might only be tier 3. Is it playable? I think it's tier 2 because you want to put it in Azorius control. I think. Right? I think Azorius control approves. This is tough, man. I don't like to like just throw out tier 2s out there, but I think like my gut is telling me no, put this in tier 3. I'm giving this a tier 3. I think this has a lot of potential, but my experience telling me I really like this card, but then if it's playable, depends on so many other factors in the meta. At the end of the day, if the meta is wrong for this card, it's really just a 3 mana 2/4 that gets removed, or does nothing for you. So I'm gonna put it in tier 3, but I think there is a lot of potential. Okay, speaking of Azorius control, we got Gates of Istfell. Utility land. You pay 2 generic, 1 white, 2 blue, sacrifice it, gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. Amazing. Azorius control proves, sure this is a lot of mana, but it's a land. If it's late in game, you want it, it gains a life, draws the cards, it's perfect. Like, late in game, you don't care about mana, you just want to have resources in your hand, so this is also like a tier 2 utility land. I'm sure we're gonna see some Azorius control in the meta. Speaking of Azorius control, it gets a lot of support here. We got Nico Defies Destiny. It's a saga, 3 mana. First chapter, you gain 2 life for each foretold card you own in exile. Second chapter, add white and blue. Spend this mana only to foretell cards or cast spells that have foretell. And then to return target card with foretell from your graveyard to your hand. Alright, so I think like something Fortress Zodia's control definitely has potential. I think it's still going to be built around something like a Dream Troll as a win condition, but the rest of the deck is going to feel pretty fresh because of all those Foretell cards, and made some notes about this card, which I would like to share with you. So, first off, one challenge this card has is that while it costs only 3 mana, the biggest utility of this card comes when you play it later in the game, because later in the game, it's more likely that you have multiple cards that you've foretold, so you gain more life on the first chapter. And later in the game, it's more likely that you have a foretold card in your graveyard which you can return to your hand. So there's this awkwardness in terms of mana curve, where it's a low curve mana card, but you actually want to play it later. So in deck building, you should probably just in your mind, you should treat it maybe like a 5 or 6 mana card, in the way that you're going to play, you want to play this on turn 5 and 6 and adjust your deck accordingly, right? Because then you gain more life, and that's great, and you can get a card from the graveyard. That being said, if you keep that in mind, I think this is really, really good value. You're gaining life. You love to do that in a control deck. Later, you're getting a Foretell card from the graveyard, and in between turn 2, you ramp, right? You gain additional mana, which you may only use for Foretell cards, but one funny like play pattern I wrote down is like, on turn 2 you can foretell Aaron's Epiphany. It's a new spell that lets you take an extra turn. Turn 3 you play Nico Defies Destiny, you gain 2 life immediately. And then turn 4 you gain 1 white, 1 blue. You have 4 mana from your lands, and you can then foretell Aaron's Epiphany for its foretell cost of 6 mana and take an extra turn on turn 4, which actually is probably not great, actually. It's just mostly at this point just draw a card, put a land on the battlefield. But it's something you can do. Another thing you can do is, I think Starheim Unleashed is really nice with foretelling this. Starheim Unleashed is the foretell that lets you create angels. Turn 2, you foretell Starheim Unleashed. Turn 3, you play Nico Defies Destiny, and then turn 4, you have 6 mana available, and you can use 5 of that mana to create 2/4/4 White Angel Warrior creature, so flying and vigilance, which sounds really good, right? Besides these play patterns on turn 4, there's so many good foretell cards you would like to want to have back with this. There was a new card released today, which I'm going to talk about in detail tomorrow. It's called Doomscar, 5 mana and white sorcery with destroy all creatures, and a foretell cost of 1 and double white. This lets you get back that card from graveyard. What's also nice getting back from graveyard is like Raven Form, exile another artifact or creature, or you get back a Saw It Coming, which is the foretell counter spell. There is Behold the Multiverse, which for 4 mana lets you scry to then draw 2 cards. You know, so there's just a lot of value packed into this card, and I would like expect 1 or 2 of these being played in Azorius control decks. And I'm giving this a tier 3. I think this is very specific, and it completely relies on the foretell archetype, but in that archetype, this is really good value and allows for some interesting turn 4 play patterns. Alright. Next we got Arnie Slays the Troll, another saga in Gulkaris. First law counter, target creature you control fetch up to 1 target creature you don't control. Second law counter, add red, put 2 1/1 counters up to 1 target creature you control. And law counter 3, you gain life equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Now what I want to note about this card is, let me drink first. All these 3 effects are basically they are all the effects of Inscription of Abundance from Zendikar Rising, which is this 2-mana instant in green with kicker 5, and which has really all these same modes on. And I think this saga is actually better because Inscription of Abundance was basically saw 0 play. But the effects on Inscription of Abundance are actually decent effects. They're not super great, but they're good, right? And this gives you some nice value. So in Gruul, there's just 2 mana. Remove a creature, remove one of your opponent's creature, right? You have big creatures. First low counter, you have to fight. They fight each other, so you move. It's just removal for your opponent's creatures. Second low counter, it rams you a bit, which is interesting, and you get 2/1/1 counters. And then the third one, it's fine, but it's, you know, in creature heavy deck, it's real. Doesn't matter. So I think also because of the ramp aspect. So how does this work? Like, I'm pretty sure you never want to play this on turn 2 because on turn 2 you have nothing to fight for. You might want to play this on like realistically on turn 4 because on turn 3 you get a Lustrous Beast out. Turn 4 you can play this, remove a creature from your opponent, have 2 mana left to play your Brushfire Elemental. And then turn 5 you'll have 6 mana available, put 2/1/1 counters. All of that doesn't sound that... It doesn't make a lot of sense in my head, but I think... Yeah, I think realistically this is going to see 0 play. Yeah, let's just put this. I think it's going to see 0 play. However, I want to say that the effects are decent enough to see experimentation, definitely. So, rare play in tier 4, but my gut is telling me this is like a tier 5 card. Next up we got Contagious Fear. 4 mana sorcery in black, which says choose a creature type. Each creature other than the chosen type gets -3/-3 until end of turn. And there is we have a card in standard called Witch's Vengeance, which costs 1 less mana, is also in black. So have creatures of the creature type of your choice get -3/-3 until end of turn. So this is like a reverse Witch's Vengeance, and because of that, it's way better. Because I think this is in black, so you put this in Elf Tribal or in like Berserker Tribal, and then you choose Elf or Berserker, and you have a one-sided board wipe against your opponent, which is super powerful. That's really, really good. That being said, I think this is a good sideboard card because you might not run into other creature-heavy decks, right? If you look at the meta right now, you couldn't main deck this though because we have a creature-heavy meta, which is pretty cool, and you can put this in there into your tribal deck and have a one-sided board wipe. That being said, those tribal decks usually tend to be aggressive, and this is like a turn 4. Let's put it this way: putting this in your deck makes so that you can put another creature in your deck, right? But this could lead to some play patterns where on turn 4, you know, you have like a very big turn where you remove all your opponent's creatures and you're swinging for a ton of damage. None of your creatures can get blocked. So that sounds really good. So yeah, this for me is a tier 3 card. It only fits into... Does it actually only fit into tribal decks? I mean, you could also play this in a control deck. But then again, at 4 mana, we have Extinction Event, which is just better. So, depends on the meta, but I would say this is simply... Where is it? This is like a tier 3 card. It's for tribal decks, mostly. That's really it. Yeah, for tribal decks it's fine. For everything else, it's just bad. But actually for tribal decks, I don't know if tribal decks want to play this. I think this is actually like a tier 4 card, because while I think this is decent, it might just be the case that the deck building of those tribal decks doesn't allow this card to fill out a whole deck slot. So I put this in tier 4. Next up we got Battle Mammoth. So this is like confirmed now. This already got spoiled a while ago, but now it's confirmed. Let's talk about it. It's a 5 mana 6/5 elephant with trample in green. It says, whenever a permanent you control becomes target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. And it's got Foretell for 2 and double green. So, you got a big beater here with Foretell. So you can, you can just play this on turn 4 if you like. Turn 2, Foretell this. Turn 3, do something else. You can even play this on turn 3. If on turn 1 you play Guild Goose, turn 2 Foretell this, and then turn 3 you have 3 mana plus the 1 mana from Guild Goose. Turn 3 you could play a 6/5 Trampler, which cantrips if it gets removed, right? So the question is, would you want to play this on turn 3 rather than, for example, Questing Beast, which has haste? I don't know. It's difficult. I mean, this card is a big beater, right? It's a 6/5 with Trampler, which can come down on turn 4, but it always has this problem with being removed, with removal spells, because like Elder Gargaroth is also a big beater at 5 mana, and Elder Gargaroth doesn't see that much play, because often it's just too slow, and it's just gets removed, and then that's it. This draws you a card if it gets removed, so there is that. I don't know. I'm not really convinced by this card, I have to say. The Foretell is nice, but I mean, in an aggressive green deck, do you really want to Foretell? Don't you want on turn 2 just play your Scavenging Ooze, for example, and then... And do you even want to play Gilded Goose in an aggressive green deck? These are all these thoughts where you can look at cards in a vacuum. You want to look at cards in the context of deck building and the meta and so on, and this card just doesn't convince me. Sure, it draws you a card, but it really dies to everything. So, plus a big downside is it has 5 toughness, so it dies to a Lovestruck Beast. That's actually a big deal. If this had 6 toughness, this would actually be a whole other story, because then you could look at the mana and say, you know what, you can play this on turn 4 and it can block Lovestruck Beast and survive. So that would be big, but it's not the case. And because of that, I'm putting this into like tier 4 category. I am not convinced by this card. Next I got Finn the Fangbearer, just a card I thought I need to talk about. It's 2 mana, 1/3, legendary creature human warrior with Death Touch. And whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. So, in fact, or like poison counters are in standard actually with this card. And for those of you who don't know, it says a player with 10 or more poison counters loses the game. Yeah, so if your Death Touch creatures deal 10 combat damage to your opponent, he just lost. Doesn't matter how high his life total is. So that's big. What do I think about this card? Well, from M21 there's this card called Hooded Blightfang, which is a 3 mana 1/4 snake in black with Death Touch, which says whenever a creature you control with Death Touch attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, and whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals damage to a Planeswalker, destroy the Planeswalker. So we have some like Death Touch Tribal support in standard, and I mean, Death Touch always has this advantage of trading with any creature, right? And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this would be a jank deck, because your whole deck would rely on this card, and if you don't draw it, you just, your deck probably just doesn't work. So I think it's cool that there are poison counters in standard right now, and Questing is, for example, is Death Touch. That would be a major Death Touch creature. But at the end of the day, it's like janky. It can see some rare play in some jank decks, but at the end of the day, this is getting like 0 playing constructed, I would say. It's just too janky. 0 play, but you can try to build a deck with it. Next I got Glorious Guardian, 4 mana 3/4, Anti-Cleric with Flash and Flying, and says when Glorious Guardian enters the battlefield, Exile any number of target non-angel creatures you control until the Glorious Guardian leaves the battlefield. And you can foretell for 3 mana. This card is really cool. It's really nice for white weenie decks as a protection against board wipes, because your opponent casts his Shatter the Sky, or even its Extinction event, which is actually the big deal. And you flash this in, you exile all your other creatures, which must not be angels. And then only Glorious Guardian gets exiled, and then all those other creatures come back on the battlefield, and potentially even have entered battlefield effects, right? And then you can even foretell this for 2 and a green, to make it even cost less on later turns. And the other thing is just that, imagine this, like, you went first as a white weenie deck, you have your board, and it's turn 4, and you have 4 mana available, and you just swing in there, right? And you don't use your mana. It's your opponent's turn. Now there are 2 scenarios. He casts a board wipe, and you cast this, and you protect all your creatures, which is nice, and you lose this angel, obviously. Or your opponent doesn't deal with your board. They can just still flash it in and still develop your board without needing to do it on your turn. So I think very cool implications with this card. I'm gonna put this in the tier 3 category because, white weenie just might be too aggressive to care about protection from board wipes, and instead it just wants to kill his opponent fast. So I'm gonna put this in tier 3, but it's just really nice protection against board wipes, I think. So yeah, tier 3 card, probably. I mean, it works with any like creature heavy deck, right, that wants to protect its creatures. So I'm gonna put this in tier 3 because it can also go, for example, maybe like warriors or something. Or clerics. Next up we got Littjara Mirror Lake. Actually, do I put this in tier 4? I'm gonna put this in tier 4 because I think it's nice, but I think it's gonna be rarely played. Next we got Littjara Mirror Lake, another utility land right here. Damn, I need to drink, man. And it's the blue one, or the Simic one, so to say. And you pay 5 mana, sack it, create a token as a copy of target creature you control. Except it enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it, activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. Now, I think this card is not that great. In Simic colors, or let's say in decks that play Simic colors, I just don't see right now what kind of creature you would like to copy. I mean, if you're playing Band, you could copy a Dream Trawler. So that's cool. But it's not like that Band Control is any big meta deck right now, or big viable deck. So, yeah, I think this card is fine. You could play it as like a one-off, maybe like Band Control, but it's just like there's no deck right now that supports this card. So I'm gonna put this into 4. Might see some fringe play, and it's always this thing, it's just a land. It's a tapped land. If you put one of these into your deck or 2 of in the right deck, it's not like you're sacrificing a lot. So I think this could see like fringe play. Next I've got Blood on the Soul, 6 mana snow sorcery. I think I already talked about this one, but this got also confirmed, so I'm gonna talk about it again right now. Snow sorcery, choose 1, destroy all creatures or destroy all planeswalkers, and then return a creature or planeswalker card with CMC X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast a spell. So it's a big board wipe. You can choose creatures or planeswalkers. Other than that, no requirements, so it just destroys everything. And what I've noted about this card is that I talked earlier in the video about the thing that I think the Sultai Control is a viable deck archetype. And I think you could play one of these in a Sultai Control deck. And you have like your Garruk Cursed Huntsman in the deck, you have your Ashiok Nightmare Moose. Just very good high CMC planeswalkers that you can revive with this. Or what you could also do is just 6 CMC. I'm gonna play a Sultai control deck with Vorinclex. Gonna play a Vorinclex Sultai control Superman's deck. And this also hits Vorinclex. Vorinclex is in the graveyard. You cast this for 6 mana with 6 snow mana. And destroy all creatures. And then Vorinclex comes out, 6 CMC. Bam, Trample Haster. You can, pump up your Planeswalkers. They get more counters. It's amazing. Yeah, so I think in the right deck this is fine. As a low counter deck, as a one-off, maximum a two-off, because it's very costly, and if you're a control deck, you're rather looking for this 4 mana board wipes, if possible, and we have Extinction Event right now, so this one replaces Extinction Event, but it's a really nice late game value board wipe. So I think this is like a tier 3 card. It's pretty good. Next up, we got a reprint of the Disdainful Stork. I just wanted to mention this because the Disdainful Stork is just a very decent card. 2 mana instant counter target spell with CMC 4 greater. Very good sideboard card, so this is a tier 2 card, definitely. In the sideboard, or in a very high CMC meta, but mostly in the sideboard, and there it's a very good card. Next up, we got Ascent of the Worthy, 3 mana Orzo Saga, which says choose a creature you control until your next turn. All damage that would be dealt to creatures you control is dealt to that creature instead. And then chapter 3, return target creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield with flying counter on it. That creature is an Ancient Warrior in addition to its other types. Now, okay, I have some thoughts about this card. First off, let's talk about the first 2 lower counters. It's you can choose any creature, and all damage that would be dealt to other creatures is dealt to that specific creature instead. Now, a meme thing would be to have a Brash counter on the battlefield, the 5 mana 1 Goblin with Indestructible. Says whenever it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. And then you put down a Storm's Wrath, which is 4 damage to each creature, and all the damage gets redirected to Brash counter, which redirects it to your opponent. But that's just, that's memey. No, aside from that, actually, we have Storm's Wrath in Standard as a board wipe. We also saw this 5 mana, let's say, Giant Saga in Izzet, which deals 4 damage to all creatures on the board. We've seen this Izzet Utility Land that does 2 damage to all creatures on the board. So I think the chapter 1-2 can be a way to protect your board, but it's super situational, and at the end of the day, it's not like something you can, it's not an effect that you can reliably take advantage of, I would say. What you can do is use this for combat, right? So only one of your creatures takes combat damage, but it's not worth it to play this card for this. What's interesting though is, and what I want to note about this card in the context of other cards, is that we have gotten a lot of cards, and I mean a lot of cards, with Kaldheim that return creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Got Ascent the Worthy. We got Cardo's Vicious Return, which is the 4 mana Rakdos Saga, which on chapter 3 also returns a creature card from graveyard to the battlefield. We already have Elf of Congress Death in the meta. And there was another card, like usual 5 mana Sorcery, return your creature card from graveyard to battlefield. Also in Kaldheim. And I think we've reached this critical mass with Kaldheim with, how would you say, like cheap revival effects that you could build like a archetype around it. I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try to build something like a Mardu Reanimator deck, where you have Ascent the Worthy in there, Cardo's Vicious Return, and Ascent of the Worthy, I would really only put it in there for the 3rd lore counter. It's probably not worth it. I'm gonna try it to make it work. But the thing about this Ascent of the Worthy Saga and the 4 mana Rakdos Saga is that they only cost 3 and 4 mana respectively. So you can, in the early turns, just put these down and then use discard effects to put your big creatures in the bin and then revive them. And you know, just have really explosive, spicy turns where you get big creatures on the board. And because of that, I think I'm going to experiment with this card 100%. At the end of the day, I think it's just a tier 4 card. It won't see a lot of play, but I want to use it and experiment with, with an archetype, with a reanimated archetype. I think there's a critical mass of cards right now for that. Next up, got Colossal Plow. This is just like a meme card, but I want to talk about it. It's, wait, what's the next one? Yeah. It's a 2-mana artifact vehicle. It's a 6/3 with crew 6, and whenever it attacks, add triple white mana, and you gain 3 life on the end of turn. Don't lose this mana, steps and phases end. And this card is Mental Blade with Giant Ox, which was this 2-mana card with 6 toughness, which allows you to use its toughness to crew. So you can use your Ox to crew, and then attack with this 6/3, and you know, ram, gain 3 life. The effect is pretty good. But, you know, it requires you to run shitty Giant Ox creatures in your deck. And it's a 6/3, which means it really dies to anything, any creature of your opponent. So I just want to talk about it because I think it's a really cool meme card, but this won't see play. Next we have Maya, Bredaguard Protector, 5-mana 2/3 human warrior in Celestial colors, legendary creature. Other creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. So, Celestial is back, baby, or is it? So I want to say that we have Felidar Retreat in standard, right? Which is this 4-mana enchantment, landfall, create a 2/2 cat, or put 1/1 counters on all of your creatures. Felidar Retreat is just straight up better than this card, and I think you have to compare it with Felidar Retreat because Felidar Retreat is an enchantment, this is a creature, so this is easier removed. Felidar Retreat makes 2/2s, this makes 1/1s, and then Felidar Retreat puts 1/1 counters on creatures and gives them vigilance on the end of turn. And I just don't see at 5 mana that this survives on the board. It has 3 toughness, so at least it survives a shock or a storm, that's cool. But yeah, this is not going to see play. You know, I love these kinds of cards. I love these cards that, you know, make tokens, make so that your board goes wide, but this just won't see play in a meta. I'm very sure this won't be viable. So this is like his tier 5 card, but I really like this kind of cards. You know, you can build a meme deck with Felidar Retreat and just flood your board with warriors and cats with landfall triggers. But unfortunately, this won't see play. Next up, I wanted to mention this common, Battlefield Raptor, 1 white mana for a 1/2 flying first strike bird. I think this is just a very decent 1-drop. Right now in white, we don't need good 1-drops because we got so many. We have the is it called Skyclave Cleric? I don't think so. No, but we got the 1-mana Cleric that makes Angels. We got Elsa of Life's Bounty. We got the Doggo that defends you. But I just want to mention it. It's very decent. You know, in like Heliod decks, and you put 1 counters on it. It flies. It's got first strike even. So I just wanted to mention it. But right now, it's going to see 0 play. Maybe it's like a tier 4 card. White Weenie. I mean, White Weenie has better cards. Then again, this could you could see this being played in Azorius Flyers. It's not an archetype anymore, but this would probably go in Azorius Flyers. Why not? So maybe this is like tier 4 actually. Is it? Probably not. I think it's tier 4. Let's leave it tier 4. Next I got Frost Augur, 1 blue mana for 1/2 snow creature human wizard, and you can pay snow mana, tap it, look at the top card of your library. If it's a snow card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. Now this card is actually big. I mean, if you play a real snow deck that's really focused on snow, this in 90-95% of all cases has Pay 1 mana, tap, draw a card. For 1 mana, 1/2. I mean, dice to anything, but it's 1 mana, draw a card. I don't know in what kind of snow deck you would want to have a 1 mana 1/2. But it's definitely a decent effect, so I wanted to mention it. And I'm gonna put this in the tier 4 category. I think the effect is decent, so this could see play. Next up we got Arnie Broken Brow. It's a 3 mana 3/3. This already also got spoiled, but I want to talk about it shortly here. It's a human berserker, it's got haste, and it's got both. Pay 1, you may change Arnie Broken Bow's base power to 1 plus the greatest power among other creatures you control at the end of turn. Now, this for me is a tier 3 card. It's going to go on berserker decks. It's got haste, which is great. And if you play this on turn 4, you can boast it right away. Although I doubt, I mean, other creatures might have 3 toughness, so you would pay 1 to make this a 4/3 with haste. So that's not great, but maybe you could also put this in like Gruul decks, together with Lovestruck Beast, pump this up to a 6/3 with haste. That seems good. So I think the haste makes this playable. The boast is situational, but can be good. And yeah. That being said, I want to note that on turn 4 in Gruul, or even like in red aggro, you'd rather want to play your Embercleave or your Great Henge. So this might interfere with that, but I'm gonna put this in like the tier 3 category. Maybe tier 4. I mean, the haste is a big advantage. Yeah, I'm gonna put this in tier 3. Tier 3. Actually, I'm gonna put this in tier 4. Because in Gruul, it's a free drop, and 3 wanna play your Lovestruck Beast or your Kizune Mammoth. So I'm gonna put this in tier 4. I think you could maybe play this in red aggro, but I'm really not convinced by this card. Next up, we got a pixely picture here. It's Haunting Voyage. It's another black mythic rare, 6 mana sorcery. Choose a creature type. Return up to 2 creature cards of that type from your graveyard to the battlefield if this spell was foretold. Return all creature types of the type from your graveyard to the battlefield instead. And the foretell cost is 7, so it's actually higher than the original cost. Now, what do I think about this card? I want to compare this with Nefroy, Apex of Death. It's one of those Apex mutate mythic beasts from Ikoria, which you can mutate onto another creature for 7 mana. And it says, whenever this creature mutates, return any number of target creature cards with total power 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And Nefroy sees absolutely 0 play. And I think it's also going to see 0 play, because the thing is, in what kind of deck would you want to play this? I mean, maybe you could, I think you could maybe play this in Elf Trial, because elves usually have a easier time generating a lot of mana, so paying 7 mana might be not too much to return all else to the battlefield. But then you could also just play instead Nefrox. Oh, sorry. You can also instead just play your Nefrog Apex of Death, because you can actually mutate for green and black colors, so it's the same, and then you have better creature in the deck. I don't know. I mean, the advantage of this is that you can, just foretell it on some turn. We have 2 mana lying around, and then forget about it. And it can be discarded when it's in foretell, when it's in exile. And then for elf decks, yeah, maybe just like a big finisher. You put like 1, maximum 2 of these into the deck. And then later, you're out of resources, you top deck this, pay. You can't even top. No, you don't top deck this. You draw this early, put 2 mana in it, forget about it, and then you just have this lying around as a backup plan. And bring all your elves back to the battlefield. Yeah, and just like any tribal deck that has black in it might want to play it, but it's just very expensive, so I am doubting this card. I think I'm gonna put it in tier 4 or tier 3. I mean, you could put it in Elf Tribal. Huh, this is a tough one. But I'm gonna put this in tier 3 or tier 4. It's so costly. Huh. I'm gonna give this the benefit of the doubt because of foretell, actually, mainly. Just somehow the fact that you can foretell this, forget about it. And you know what I mean by this is like, by foretelling, like, you're at least using this. Like, if you draw this early, it's not like that it's a dread card. You can already pay the foretell to do something with your mana and then use it later. So I'm gonna give this benefit of doubt as a tier 3 card. Next up, we got Valley of Wandering Glow. It's a snowland, and it's battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you choose a color, and you add a mana of the chosen color. I wanted to mention this because it's snowland with 4 mana fixing, so this goes probably in some snow decks, you know, which one mana fixing. I could imagine being a thing, so I'm gonna give this like a tier 4 rating. Next up, we got a favorite of mine. It's Immerstorm Predator. It's 2 black and a red for Vampire Dragon, 3/3 with flying. And whenever Immerstorm Predator becomes tapped, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard and put a 1/1 counter on Immerstorm Predator. Then says sacrifice another creature. Immerstorm Predator gains indestructible on end of turn. Tap it. Now this card has a lot of going on for it, so let's talk about it. First of all, it's a free sack outlet like Wall Strider, and you know, if you want to have like Rakdos sacrifice stuff, which is not really the thing right now in standard, but it can come back. You probably want an Immerstorm Predator, I think, rather than Wall Strider, because Immerstorm Predator is just better, right? It makes itself indestructible. It grows over time. You exile stuff from graveyards from your opponent, which is relevant in the meta. So that's really cool. I think it can replace the Wall Strider. Challenge remind me that this costs 1 mana more, so because of deck building things, maybe you still want a Wall Strider, or maybe both. You could also play both in one deck. But the other thing which I'm really more excited about is that I really want to build a Rakdos control deck with Immerstorm Predator and Skyclave Shades. And you can basically, Skyclave Shades always come back from your graveyard when you play a land, right? To your hand. And you can have your Immerstorm, you can have the Skyclave Shade out and your Immerstorm Predator. If your opponent wants to remove the Predator, you just sack your Skyclave Shade, make the Predator indestructible, put a 1 counter on it, exile a card from graveyard, and then on your turn, you play a land, you get Skyclave Shade back, you play the Skyclave Shade, and you always have a creature ready to sacrifice to make the Predator indestructible. So I think that's really cool. That being said, that's my experimental side. I don't know if that's going to be any good. But I think this card is actually really cool and it seems powerful, so I'm gonna give this a tier 3 rating. Next up, we're almost through here. This video is getting long. We got the Raven's Warning, a 3 mana saga. And chapter 1, create a 1/1 bluebird creature with flying, you gain 2 life. Chapter 2, whenever one or more creatures you control are flying, deal combat damage to a player this turn, look at the player's hand and draw a card. And in chapter 3, you may put a card you own from outside the game on top of your library. Well, this card obviously would go in like in Zordis Flyers deck, which is not a deck right now because it got killed as soon as War of the Spark rotated out and Rally of Wings rotated out. The chapter 3, if you want such an effect, just play Fair of Wishes. It's better. Like, the chapter 3 in itself doesn't justify playing this card in deck. You just have too many alternatives. So this really comes down to Azorius Flyers, and Azorius Flyers is not a deck at all in standard right now. Also, chapter 3 just puts the stuff on top of your library. So you're not drawing it, which is the downside. So I think this card is going to 0 play, tier 4. I'm gonna put this in tier 4 for the Zorius Flyers, but yeah, this doesn't excite me. Next time we got Cosmos Elks here, 4 mana artifact. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card if your life total is greater than your starting life total, otherwise you gain 2 life. Now this card. The one meta deck this could fit in right now, theoretically, is Mono Weight Life Gain, because you gain so much life there that you could consistently draw a card there. But that's a big if, and you're giving up, you know, card slots for creatures or something. So would you want to put as a Mono White Life Gain to occasionally draw a card on your end step? This is a tough one, and I'm saying no. You could experiment with it in Mono White Life Gain, but I think this would rather be a mistake. So, and apart from that, it's completely useless, because paying 4 mana to gain life, 2 life every turn, is not worth it. If you want to have such an effect in a control deck, rather play Clothis, God of Destiny. Also gives you 2 life every turn. Costs 3 mana, is indestructible, and also hits your opponent for 2 damage every turn. So, unfortunately, why I like this card, I think it's not really playable. You could experiment with it in Mono White Life Gain to have some card draw and get more resources, but this is just going to see 0 play, I think. Yeah. Nah, this is 0 play. Is it tier 4? Is it 0? Is it tier 4? You know, I'm gonna put this in tier 4. Nah, I'm gonna say 0 play. Let's be realistic here. Next up, we got Tyra's Sanctum, another non-basic land. At colorless mana, 2 mana, target legendary creature becomes a god in addition to its other types. Put a 1/1 counter on it. And pay 4 mana, sack it, put an indestructible count on target god. So you can make any god indestructible. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about, for example, this blue god in the beginning of the video, which can come back as a big creature. And you know, you could like run one of these lands, just one of these lands in Azorius control. Which means that just run one of these will mean this is not a downside playing this in your Azorius control deck concerning colors, especially if you have the world tree anyway, then this produces any kind of color, right? And then if your god comes back, draws you a bunch of cards, you can pay 4 mana to make it indestructible. Seems pretty good. So I think because of the fact that because of World Tree, running lands that produce colorless mana won't be a big of a downside for multicolored decks. You can just put one of these in a deck which runs gods, or even 2 of these, and be happy, because it's not a legendary land, right? So I could see this being fringely played. Like, as I think there's a tier 4 card. This can see some rare play in decks which have gods. Yes, I got Graven Lore, 5 mana, snow instant. Scry X, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast spell, then draw 3 cards. So if you pay 5 snow mana, there's a Scry 5, draw 3. That's pretty good at instant speed. So, as I said, you know, I think Azorius Control is building itself, and together with snow mana. And this is just another one of these cards supporting that, so without talking too much about it, I think this is a tier 3 card. I think this won't be played in every deck because 5 mana is a lot. Plus you need to run snow mana, which is probably not really a downside. But I'm gonna put this at tier 3. Next up we got the Bloodski Massacre. We also already know this card, but I'm just gonna go through it quickly. Chapter 1, create a 2/3 red demon berserker creature with menace. Chapter 2, whenever berserker attacks turn, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Chapter 3, add red for each berserker control. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So this obviously goes in Berserker Tribal. That fits perfectly, because the nice thing about the saga is you pay 3 mana, you have an immediate impact on the board, you get a creature, which is not super great. It's 2/3 with menace. but you have an immediate impact on the board, which means putting this Saga into your deck doesn't mean that you cut down on creatures, which is nice. And then chapters 2 and 3 are problematic because they solely rely on the fact that you have berserkers on the board. Well, and if you have none, then you have 0 utility, right? So, for example, what could happen is you go second, you play this on turn 3, and your opponent untaps with like 4 mana and board wipes, and you get nothing. And the only thing you get if you play another berserker is just add a red mana. And that's not great, so I think at the end of the day, this is probably not a good Saga. You should experiment with it, but I want to be cautious here and put this in the tier 4 category. I mean, you want to put this in Berserker Tribal, but then you really need to test this out. Okay, how consistently can I pull off, especially Chapter 2, which draws you cards, which is the big one, right? So I would say tier 4. This needs experimentation. Next up, another utility then, Rakdos. It's Immerstone Skullcairn. And you pay 4, sack it, it deals 3 damage to target player, that player discards a card, activate this ability only anytime you could cast sorcery. And before I want to evaluate this card on its own, let's read the next and last card first. With Skull Raid, 4 mana sorcery, target opponent discards 2 cards. If fewer than 2 cards were discarded this way, you draw cards equal to difference, and you can foretell for 1 black. So, if you look at both this card, Skull Raid and Immerstone Skullcairn, I think Rakdos has so much support right now for a really good discard deck. If you watch my channel, you already know that I recently built a discard deck in Rakdos, which I really liked and actually worked quite well. And I think this archetype is only getting stronger with this Immerstone Skullcairn. 3 damage can just be really nice to finish up opponent. He discards a card, that's great. As Skull Raid, the cool thing about Skull is that you can foretell it, so you can cast it later for only 2 mana. And then either opponent discards 2 cards for 2 mana, which is really good. Or if your opponent has only 1 card in hand, you draw a card, and if your opponent has 0 cards in hand, which is your your goal in this card deck, then you just draw 2 cards for 2 mana, which is great. And apart from that, we already have Croxa, we got Liliana, Waker of the Dead, which I used in that deck. Another big one is the Valky, God of Lies, with the Tibor Planeswalker on the other side, which is also in Rakdos colors, and just gives you that late game card draw. So I think just Discard Tribal is getting a lot of support right here, and because of that, and because I know that this archetype actually works in a way, I'm gonna put this in the tier 3 category. And I think these cards are actually quite decent. And with that, I'm gonna wrap up the video. Yeah, some really cool new cards here, and tomorrow is going to be the last day of the spoiler season. Tomorrow is going to be January 19th, and then we've seen all the cards from Kaldheim. So tomorrow I'm hopefully going to do the last video on this and just wrap up all the rest of the cards. I think there are only like 30 cards left, and it's actually change here. Yeah, like 30 cards left. So far, I really like what I see. I said I think only World is the only problematic card I've seen so far. The rest of the set seems really amazing, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I see you guys on the next one.